Child A, aged 13, died shortly after 10 to 6 on Saturday, May the 13th, 2015, inside a hedgerow off Westfield Lane in Mansfield as a result of a hanging. Child A went missing 3 days earlier, leaving her home address following an argument with the family. Assistant Coroner Miss Bower said that she could not be sure if Child A intended to kill herself after she crept into bushes after going missing from home and hanged herself. Miss Bower also said that social services missed at least 11 opportunities to intervene in Child A's life. Chris Few, who was at the time the independent chair of the Nottinghamshire Safeguarding Children's Board, said that the death of Child A was tragic and shared the thoughts of himself and the organisation with everybody who knew her. He went on to say that the board owes it to Child A to learn from what happened, and Nottinghamshire Safeguarding Children's Board, as a result of that, commissioned a serious case review to examine what could be learnt that could go on to lead to improvements in the protection of children. In this videocast, we're going to work through that serious case review to explore the findings and identify any learning that we can take away from it ourselves. So as I said, Nottinghamshire Safeguarding Children's Board, the NSCB, considered the circumstances of Child A's death and agreed that they had met the criteria for carrying out a serious case review, as defined at the time by Working Together to Safeguard Children 2015. The decision to undertake a serious case review was made by the independent chair of the board in September 2015. The review established that whilst there were concerns for the emotional well-being of Child A, it could not have been predicted that she would take her own life. The NSCB agreed that the serious case review should be undertaken using the Significant Instant Learning Process (SILP) methodology. SILP is a learning model which engages frontline staff and their managers in reviewing cases, focusing on why those individuals act in a certain way at the time. This SILP model of review adheres to the principles of proportionality, learning from good practice, the active involvement of practitioners engaging with families, and systems and mythology. The serious case review into Child A explored the period of the 1st of January 2014 through to the 2nd of June 2015. So if we start by looking at the family structure then, that we know that Child A had two siblings, sibling 1 aged 11 and sibling 2 aged 11 months. The parents of Child A are referred to in this report as mother and father, and other family members are referred to by their relationship to Child A, for example, parental godmother. Mother, father, Child A and sibling 1 lived in Derbyshire until the parents separated in 2011. Child A's father at that point moved away from the area in 2014 as a result of that separation. Mother's partner is the father of sibling 2 and is referred to in this report as mother's partner throughout. Mother's partner has children from a previous relationship, one of whom was the subject of family court proceedings regarding contact with mother's partner. In terms of the agencies involved, we know that the family moved frequently between Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire. Child A was registered with 5 GP surgeries and had had 8 changes of school at the time that she died. When mother and mother's partner married in 2013, the family received support from the multi-agency team in Derbyshire, where, in 2014, a CAF was initiated. The main role of the multi-agency team is to support children, young people and families who have additional needs, to work with specialist services such as disability teams, and to help children and families become healthier and meet their full potential. The family moved to Nottinghamshire, however, before the CAF could have been completed. Concerns about Child A were evident in agency records from birth, and it was recorded by some professionals that mother and father had difficulties in meeting the needs of children. In an interview with the lead reviewer, mother reported that she wasn't aware of any concerns and said that she was experiencing significant domestic violence from father at the time. Mother informed the lead reviewer that she was frequently asking for help with the children but received no support. Between 2002 and 2008, 9 domestic incidents between mother and father were registered on the police incident computer system, and it was noted that both Child A and sibling 1 were witnessed to some of these incidents of domestic violence. Looking at the background prior to the scoped period, we know that child A was born in 2002. In 2009, mother had informed the GP about the challenging behaviours of child A and sibling 1, and referrals were then made to the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service CAMS, the Child Support Services, and the community paediatrician. Mother went on to cancel an appointment for sibling 1 with CAMS and advised that the service was no longer required. Child A was referred to Child Support Services, however there's no entry on their medical records regarding the outcome of this referral. Between 2002 and 2008, 9 domestic incidents between mother and father were registered in the police incident computer system. At the beginning of 2013, mother's partner presented at hospital in Derbyshire and requested help with his mental health. There was no previously known history of mental health concerns, and mother's partner was assessed as high risk of self-harm. However, he did not attend any of the follow-up appointments with that mental health team. Mother reported deterioration in her partner's mental health during an appointment with the mental health clinicians in September 2013. And around about the same point, sibling 1 wasn't taken to an appointment with the community paediatrician. In October 2013, mother was pregnant, and records of the initial antenatal booking in Derbyshire noted that mother was the carer for a partner who experienced poor mental health at times. Following enrolment at School 1 in Derbyshire in September 2013, professionals quickly identified concerns regarding child A and met with mother and mother's partner. At an appointment with the GP in October 2013, mother stated that she'd brought child A to the surgery to reassure mother's partner that there were no underlying problems. Mother and child A were spoken to separately and together by the GP. Mother and mother's partner went into school in November 2013 as child A had been reported missing. Child A was then found in the school buildings before the police were involved, and mother was advised by school to take child A to the GP. During a telephone conversation between the GP and pastoral support staff at the school, the GP advised that child A did not have ADHD, and concerns were more likely to be linked to the chaotic home life. As such, the GP made a referral into the multi-agency team at Derbyshire. On 29th of May 2015, child A goes missing again. 3 days later, on the 2nd of June 2015, child A's body was found. 3 key episodes were identified in this series case review as the significant periods that would provide maximum opportunity for agency learning within the time frame of this report, which is the 1st of January 2014 until the 2nd of June 2015. The key episodes were the involvement of services in Derbyshire, the move to Nottinghamshire and the information exchange that may or may not have taken place, and finally the involvement of services in Nottinghamshire. So let's start by looking at key episode 1, the involvement of services in Derbyshire. Child A was reported as missing from home in January 2014 by mother's partner, who stated that child A had gone missing previously on about 4 occasions but had always returned home after an hour or 2. On return, child A confirmed to the police the account of her mother and her mother's partner that she had gone missing after arguments about being made to wash the pots. Children's Services in Derbyshire and the Police Child Abuse Unit in Derbyshire Police were made aware of this incident in accordance with the well-established procedures. At this time, the multi-agency team were processing the referral from the GP in Derbyshire, which included information about mother being pregnant, inconsistent contact with biological father, and the mental health of mother's partner. The GP noted that whilst there were no safeguarding concerns and conflict in the family was most probably due to the attention-seeking behaviours of child A. As a result of that referral, 2 members of the multi-agency team made a home visit to identify support needs and agree an action plan. Child A was also seen alone during the visit and a missing person interview was appropriately completed. As an outcome to that, child A agreed to have one-to-one sessions with a youth worker, which took place at home. In February 2014, mother contacted the police to report that child A, aged 11 at this point, was missing from home. Child A returned whilst the police were present and said that she'd walked out of the home after being punished by having to wash the pots for taking some money. It is not possible to be confident where Child A had been whilst she was missing from home. But again, the missing from home procedure was followed by the multi-agency team and the youth worker was informed. In February 2014, Child A had an introductory one-to-one session with the multi-agency team youth worker. Child A said that she had run away because she had been accused of stealing money by mother and mother's partner. In subsequent sessions, Child A said that she was anxious about the pending house move, worried that she couldn't live up to the expectations of others, and concerned about relationships within the family. In March 2014, mother was now 30 weeks pregnant, and it was noted that mother's partner was expecting to receive a custodial sentence. He was convicted of financial offences. There were clear documentation in the initial booking for the antenatal care that mother was a full-time carer for mother's partner due to his mental health difficulties. A community midwife had forwarded a pre-CAF assessment and referral to Children's Services and the Hospital Foundation Trust. A safeguarding alert was placed onto mother's notes as a result. In March 2014, Child A had her final one-to-one session with the youth worker and said that the sessions had been really helpful. Mother's partner thanked the youth worker and stated both he and mother had seen a positive improvement in the behaviour of Child A. The youth worker advised Child A, mother and mother's partners that drop-in services at school were available if Child A requested further support. A few days later, however, Child A ran away from home out of school hours to the school site and tried to contact the youth worker. A teacher took Child A home after being alerted by the caretaker who had been unable to reach the youth worker. Mother and mother's partner had not reported Child A as missing. The teacher reported being shocked about the lack of emotional warmth towards Child A when she was taken home, and about the refusal of mother and mother's partner to collect Child A from school. In addition, in discussion with the lead reviewer, mother and mother's partner disputed this account and stated that they'd agreed with the teacher that the teacher would return Child A home and talk to her about why she'd run away. The youth worker saw Child A shortly after this incident and gained the impression that Child A was very unhappy and sad about the relationships within the home. Due to increased concerns about the well-being of Child A, School 1 sought consent from mother and mother's partner to initiate a CAF. School 1 agreed to lead the team around the family meetings and began the CAF process with the support of the Derbyshire multi-agency team youth worker. The family did not identify any unmet needs during a home visit by the youth worker to discuss the CAF. An initial CAF meeting was held in May 2014, however this was brief as mother was unwell and in the late stages of pregnancy. In May 2014, sibling 2 was born and the family moved to Nottinghamshire from Derbyshire shortly after. It was known that a CAF had been started in Derbyshire, however the implications of this for sibling 2 was not considered. Child A informed School 1 early in June 2014 that she'd be leaving as the family were moving away. The behaviour of Child A deteriorated at this time and staff at School 1 stated during the review that Child A did not want to move school. The deputy head teacher from School 1 and the multi-agency team youth worker made a home visit as Child A had stopped attending school, and they informed mother and mother's partner that Child A would be reported as missing to the police if she did not go to school. Child A returned to school following this intervention and attended until the family moved to Nottinghamshire. Concerns about the household where Child A and her siblings lived were raised during a family court case in which mother's partner sought to enforce contact with his child from a previous partner. A family court advisor, FCA, from the Children and Families Court Advisory and Support Service, CAFCAS, met with the child concerned, who told the FCA that his father shouted at him, the house was dirty, and he didn't get on with the other children in the household. The FCA completed a report in 2014, and the decision of the court was that the contact between mother's partner and his child was reduced. This information was not shared with those working with Child A. CAFCAS were clear at the time and in reports submitted during this review that the issues raised and the information received from the GP about the mental health of mother's partner did not meet the threshold of concern for investigations to be made about other children. Kafkas did not share information about the wishes and feelings of the child regarding contact with his father and the allegations that he had made with Nottinghamshire Children's Services. And now to look to the second key episode, which was that move to Nottinghamshire and how that information exchange went about. There was very little information from the previous primary schools when Child A arrived at School 1, and it took time to gather information and identify concerns. When it was known that the family were moving area, School 1 communicated directly with School 2 by email in July 2014. The email was detailed and highlighted concerns which included reference to the mental health of mother's partner, over punitive sanctions applied to Child A, and the initiation of a CAF assessment which had not been completed due to the family moving from Derbyshire to Nottinghamshire. The new school were requested to be vigilant regarding the well-being of Child A and Sibling 1, and this information was logged on the safeguarding system of School 2 and shared with the school inclusion manager and the head of Years 7 and 8. There was good communication between School 1 and 2. However, had the multi-agency team in Derbyshire shared information about their involvement and specifically their commencement of a CAF with the equivalent early help services in Nottinghamshire, communication would have been enhanced. In 2015, Child A and Sibling 1 were registered at the GP in Nottinghamshire 9 months after moving to the area. Following registration with the GP, the medical notes for Child A and Sibling 1 were reviewed. Historical domestic abuse was identified, and Child A and Sibling 1 were discussed at a safeguarding children's meeting within the GP practice. It was agreed to gather more information and discuss at the next safeguarding meeting. However, Child A sadly died before this meeting was to take place. The frequent geographical moves of the family, lack of recording in primary schools, the omission to follow policies and procedures, and weakness in the system to transfer information had an impact on the inter- and intra-agency communication. Recommendations to improve communication information sharing are contained in agency reports submitted for this review, and are referred to in more detail within the analysis. So that final key episode then is episode 3, the involvement of services in Nottinghamshire. In the first few weeks of the autumn term, staff at School 2 noted concerns regarding the behaviour of Child A, and support was provided to address the behaviours. A key worker was allocated in September 2014, as Child A had been upset at school and told staff that she needed someone to talk to. Mother told the lead reviewer that she'd been concerned about the amount of time Child A had in one-to-one sessions with staff, as she felt it was more important to support Child A to develop positive peer relationships. Mother did not share these concerns with school. Child A told staff that she had previously run away from home and that she'd had lots of secrets, and one big one that her mum and the family knew but no one else was allowed to know. Child A also said that she'd written to her dad but didn't see him. Following this, School 2 contacted the Nottinghamshire Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub, MASH, in September 2014. The written transcript of the telephone conversation recorded that the school wished to check if any information had been shared between Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire regarding Child A, and if not, the school was clear that a referral needed to be made. School 2 shared concerns with the MASH officer, which included information about the secret at home, harsh punishment of Child A, which included washing all the pots, missing from home episodes, her stepfather being in custody, Child A becoming distressed if not allowed to access food, the involvement of early help services in Derbyshire, and frequent moves of the family when services became involved. The MASH officer explained that it would have been unlikely that the information from the early help services in Derbyshire would have been shared with the early help services in Nottinghamshire. The MASH officer took advice from a social worker colleague within the MASH and did not accept the referral, as it was decided that the threshold for children's social care involvement had not been met according to the Pathway to Provision Thresholds document. School 2 were advised to make a referral to Early Help Services, complete an Early Help Assessment Form, EHAF, monitor and record everything at school, and contact the MASH again in a few weeks if the family didn't engage with early help. School 2 were informed that the call would not be logged at the MASH. The day after the call to the MASH, School 2 contacted the Early Help Unit in Nottinghamshire and were advised that there was insufficient evidence to open a case, as the threshold for early help services had not been met. Although there's no transcript of this conversation, School 2 stated at the learning event that there was repeated concern shared with the MASH and stressed that early help services in Derbyshire had been involved prior to the move to Nottinghamshire. The school did not complete an early help assessment form, and a written referral to the early help team wasn't made. There is no information available from the early help unit regarding this contact, as it was policy not to record conversations unless a service was provided. School 2 did not inform the MASH about the response from the early help unit. In March 2015, Child A told her form tutor about punishments that she'd been given at home with which the form tutor considered unreasonable and harsh. Child A also said that she was made to use a carrier bag instead of her school bag and wear jogging trousers to school as a punishment. Child A's form tutor shared this information with the head of Year 7 and 8 by email and stated that she was extremely concerned that Child A was being emotionally abused by her father, mother's partner. The form tutor also said that she thought Child A had lost weight. When contacted by the school, mother and mother's partner said that this had not been a punishment and an alternative explanation was given, which was repeated in discussion with the lead reviewer of this serious case review. In March 2015, School 2 contacted the MASH for a second time to log a concern. Information which was shared verbally included details of the email from the form tutor, concerns about Child A being emotionally abused by mother's partner, frequent moves of the family, the behaviour of Child A, which was described as attention-seeking, an acknowledgement by mother and mother's partner at a recent parents' evening that they were really struggling. There was no reference to the previous telephone contact from School 2 to the MASH in September 2014, and information about the previous involvement of the multi-agency team in Derbyshire was not shared. When the MASH officer inquired about an early help assessment form, School 2 said that an early help assessment form had not yet been considered. It is important to note at this point that School 2 had been advised to complete an early help assessment form during that first telephone contact with the MASH in September 2014. The MASH officer advised School 2 that information should be shared in full with the mother before referral could be accepted, and offered reassurance when asked by the caller at School 2 if they were allowed to share all the information. It was also suggested that School 2 continue to monitor Child A, and that mother and mother's partner were referred to the parenting course that was held at the school. It was agreed that School 2 did not need to call the MASH again if satisfied with the response by mother following the sharing of information. Mother was very angry during the telephone discussion with School 2 to inform her about the concerns of the form tutor. This information was not shared with the MASH. The agency report completed by Nottinghamshire Education for this review noted that the school sought the support of other agencies and felt unsupported by the response from the MASH officer. Transcripts of the telephone calls between School 2 and the MASH, of which were made available to this serious case review, both ended with school thanking the MASH officer for the advice provided. During the learning event for this review, staff at School 2 said they did not feel able to challenge the advice from MASH, and this is considered further within the analysis. Child A was reported missing from home in Nottinghamshire following an argument on the 30th of May 2015. The police provided notification under the local joint protocol for missing children, and information was forwarded to the Children Missing Officer, the CMO. The CMO contacted colleagues in Derbyshire and received information about incidents when Child A had been reported missing from home in Derbyshire. The missing and found information was shared immediately with relevant agencies. A social worker was allocated on the 2nd of June, and a telephone strategy discussion was held between the police, health, CSC, and this took place on the same day. The information shared included the instigation of a CAF in Derbyshire, previous incidents when Child A had been missing from home, including times not reported to the police, and the probation service shared information about the mental health of mother's partner. 3 days after going missing, Child A's body was found in a hedgerow in Mansfield, Nottinghamshire. So looking at the analysis, the way that the SILT model works is it breaks that analysis down by themes, and the first theme that was analysed was the theme of transitions. Because prior to becoming a pupil at School 1, Child A experienced physical transitions which included attendance at multiple primary schools, changes of address, registration with 6 different GPs. There was also transitions within the family structure, as father left and mother's partner joined the family. Child A's name was changed to that of the mother's partner when she was 9 years old. At the time of the last house move, sibling 2 had been born and mother's partner was in prison. School files contained limited historic information from the previous schools, due in part to the frequency with which Child A moved schools. There was a view shared amongst professionals at School 1 and 2 that mother and mother's partner would move if professionals became too close to the family. Child A told staff at School 1 that she didn't want to move school, and her behaviour at School 2 was described as problematic at this time, which could have been an indicator of her distress. In discussion with the lead reviewer, mother and mother's partner said that they moved to be closer to extended family, and mother said that during the early years she moved frequently to get away from father. Whilst individuals and agencies in Derbyshire and Nottingham held some information about Child A, it was a challenge to piece this information together. The frequent transitions made it more difficult for agencies to focus on the voice of the Child A and complete a holistic and systematic assessment to address the needs of all the family. It was also a challenge to understand the emerging discrepancies between the views of professionals, information provided by Child A, and parental explanations. The second analysis was in respect to just that, the voice of the child. Direct work to seek and listen to the voice of Child A was undertaken by the multi-agency team youth worker in Derbyshire and specific staff in School 1 and School 2. However, it was acknowledged in agency reports submitted for this review that there was limited information available about the wishes and feelings of Child A, and she was described as a child who was closed about things that were happening in her home life. While significant efforts had been made in School 1 and 2 to obtain Child A's wishes and feelings, the focus of the work was on the behavioural change of Child A. It is known that Child A asked for the time-limited one-to-one sessions with the multi-agency team youth worker to go on for longer. Child A ran away from home to speak with the youth worker a few days after that final one-to-one session. Child A did talk to some adults about her life, and examples provided in agency records of which were submitted to the serious case review reflected that throughout the report. School 2 stated that it was a significant challenge to evidence the factual accuracy of what Child A said. This was further complicated as the explanations provided by mother and mother's partner often contradicted the account provided by Child A. The instance when Child A wore jogging trousers to school and also complained about having to wash the pots provide examples of such contradictions. Whether factually accurate or not, it is a concern that Child A described these events as a punishment. The discrepancy between the accounts provided by mother and that of Child A do not appear to have been explored further. It is evident from the health and education records that issues were frequently reported to mother's perspective, which provided difficulty for professionals to challenge. In 2013, a recorded comment by the GP in Derbyshire indicated that Child A saw herself as being the cause of some family difficulties. She said, "I want people to be happy, and I cause my mother's partner bad moods." It is evident that Child A was beginning to internalise the views that she was the cause of family difficulties, and this is likely to have had a significant impact on her emotional well-being and self-esteem. The GP repeated mother's description of Child A's behaviour as attention-seeking in the referral to the Derbyshire multi-agency team. There appeared to be a lack of professional curiosity to understand the cause of Child A's behaviour. Use of the term attention-seeking has implications of blame and negativity, which is likely to have influenced the intervention provided and the assessment as to level of concern. The description of her behaviour as attention-seeking following child A throughout the school. Whilst professionals may have individually questioned the cause of child A's behaviour, this was not explored in a systematic way that addressed all of the influences on child A, including school, her peers, and her family. It is possible that the behaviour of child A reflected a resourceful response to an unmet basic need for attention. Use of attachment theory to better understand the behaviour of child A may have resulted in a greater understanding of the function of child A's behaviour and increased awareness of the lived experiences of child A. There was no evidence that the description of child A as attention-seeking was challenged by any individual or agency. Management of child A's behaviour in school was described as problematic. Much effort was made within School 1 and 2 to avoid exclusions and provide a caring and supportive environment for child A. Child A responded positively and was said to enjoy one-to-one attention from the multi-agency team and from staff in both schools. Staff at School 2 described the difficulty in obtaining a clear understanding of what life was like for child A, who could present with very challenging behaviours one day and talk positively about home life and family relationships in the next. It isn't known what child A had made of the historic domestic abuse between mother and father, or whether this had an influence on her behaviour. The behaviour of children can be a clear indicator of their emotional state, and on occasions, child A presented as very needy at School 1 and 2. Professionals did not share a clear understanding of child A's wishes and feelings, information was not gathered in a systematic way, and a CAF was not completed. Without an opportunity to understand the context of the behaviour at the time and external influencing factors, it isn't possible to state with confidence what child A was attempting to communicate by her behaviour. Learning points from previous serious case reviews have highlighted the importance of recognising behaviour as a means of communication and the implications of doing so for practice. In the absence of a completed CAF, it was not possible to plan a consistent and constructive multi-agency response to the voice of child A. Intervention by the multi-agency team and School 1 and 2 was inevitably limited, as this was directed at support and the behavioural change of child A, and other potentially influencing factors including home environment, peers and school were not assessed. A multi-agency discussion may have brought together all available information and may have led to an exploration of why child A was identified as the child with the problems in the family. The importance of identifying why a child may have been treated differently within the family unit has been highlighted again within other serious case reviews. Whilst the voice of child A was heard by staff at School 1, School 2 and by the multi-agency team youth worker, the understanding of child A's lived experiences was very limited. This was acknowledged by practitioners at the learning event and within agency reports prepared for the serious case review. So looking at the topic of parental engagement, mother and father's partner informed the lead reviewer that mother had received no support from agencies, although she'd repeatedly asked for help when child A was younger. There is evidence of missed appointments in medical records for the children, and mother advised CAMS that support was no longer required in 2009. Whilst mother and mother's partner had consented to a CAF in Derbyshire, they moved authority without informing services, which would have enabled continuity of assessment and support. Mother and mother's partner also declined to identify support needs when asked to do so by the Derbyshire multi-agency team. Missed appointments were not pursued by the GP in Derbyshire. Had inquiries been made, they may have resulted in additional information about the well-being of child A being shared. Mother and mother's partner told the lead reviewer that they would have welcomed help for the whole family. This statement, however, is not supported by the lack of information sharing with the multi-agency team about mother being the carer for mother's partner and the involvement of mental health services at the time. The delay of 9 months before registering child A with the GP in Nottinghamshire contradicts the assertion of mother and mother's partner that they would have welcomed help. School 2 communicated regularly with mother and mother's partner and instigated weekly phone calls to report only the positive achievements of child A. This was an important initiative by school and good practice to highlight positive behaviour and address the frequent negative communication between the school and home. Mother and mother's partner spoke very highly about the key worker who worked with child A at school 2. It was evident that staff at school 1 and school 2 worked hard to engage positively with mother, mother's partner and child A. A culmination of factors which included missed opportunities to complete the CAF, reluctance to challenge mother and mother's partner due to ongoing efforts to develop a positive relationship with them, and reassurance by the presentation of the family as a coercive unit on occasion, contributed to the absence of a systematic assessment. During the timeline considered in this series case review, mother and mother's partner had contact with various agencies, and their level of engagement differed. There was limited information sharing between professionals, and inconsistencies in the presentation of mother's partner were not identified. Professionals did not consider whether the actions and views of mother and her partner were consistent with the best interest of child A. The fourth analysis point was around parental mental health and the importance of understanding and recognising the impact and the implications that has on a young person. Mother's partner did not have a clear mental health diagnosis, although he and mother informed various professionals that a diagnosis had been given. Mother informed maternity services that she was the full-time carer for her partner due to his mental health difficulties. Information about mother's partner's mental health was known to a wide range of agencies. However, the potential impact of his mental health on the family was not assessed. There was no documented evidence to suggest that child A's welfare was discussed, although mental health practitioners were aware that the multi-agency team were involved and that child A was running away from home and that there was relationship difficulties and arguments between child A and mother's partner. It was known that the mental health of mother's partner impacted on his behaviour. The extent to which this was normalised within the family home was unknown and remained an unassessed risk. Inconsistencies in parenting between mother's partner and paternal grandmother were identified as a concern by the clinical psychologist in Derbyshire. If this had been shared with the practitioners within the multi-agency team who were working with the family at this time, it may have informed the support and intervention offered to the family. Practitioners in adult mental health services were reassured by the involvement of CAFCAS, the presentation of mother's partner, and information provided by mother and paternal grandmother. There appears to be an uncritical acceptance of the presentation by adults and misunderstanding of the role and remit of CAFCAS. It has been acknowledged by the agency report prepared for the series case review that the adult mental health service were working in isolation with this family and that the threshold for a referral to Derbyshire County Council's Children's Services had been met. Clinicians within adult mental health stated during the review process that the case of mother's partner would have benefited from the allocations of a care coordinator as described in Derbyshire Healthcare Foundation's trust policy and procedures. A care coordinator could have provided a better overview of the case and ensured that other agencies were consulted and involved as appropriate. Absence of a care coordinator resulted in poor oversight of the clinical intervention regarding the mental health of mother's partner. Organisational constraints, specifically lack of resources, were an explanation provided by practitioners in adult mental health for the omission to appoint a care coordinator. It is unclear what effort was made to address these issues, but it is likely that organisational and capacity issues impacted on the decision making and contributed to the potential needs of all family members, particularly the children being overlooked. In the absence of concerns being identified by adult mental health practitioners, the case wasn't referred for discussion in their supervision and was not considered by them to have been met the threshold for information sharing. As part of the serious case review, Derbyshire Healthcare Foundation Trust contains a recommendation that an audit of record keeping should reflect the learning from this review. The GP in Derbyshire was aware of mother's partner's mental health difficulties, and there is no indication that the impact of this on the children was considered. There is no record to indicate that the children were discussed at the practice safeguarding meeting, or that a referral to children's services was considered. At the time, the Safeguarding Children Board threshold document in Derbyshire notes that adult mental health illness may present challenges to a child, represent emerging needs, and should trigger a referral for multi-agency assessment or early help assessment. Potential challenges to child A and other children were not identified as due in part to the lack of multi-agency assessment. There is extensive research evidence that demonstrates the impact of parental mental health problems on children. A Social Care Institute for Excellence Guide to Parental Mental Health and Children's Welfare from the SCIE in 2011 highlights key recommendations for practice, which include effective screening tools to identify adults with mental health problems who are parents, the need for a whole family assessment, and the need for effective planning to meet the individual needs of each family member. The omission to identify the impact of adult mental health on the well-being of children was also highlighted in the serious case review BDS in 2011. Whilst the circumstances of this review differ, the recommendation from the BDS review regarding information sharing between adult mental health services and relevant children's agencies is of direct relevance. Mandatory training in Think Family was introduced for all Derbyshire Healthcare Foundation Trust staff in October 2014. Neither the mental health practitioner involved in this case, in the care of mother's partner, had completed this training during the time considered within this review, as Think Family training was to be completed over a period of 3 years ending in March 2017. Weaknesses in the practice of the MPS and the CRC were identified in the agency report submitted for this serious case review. The MPS, National Probation Service, pre-sentence report concluded that the mental health difficulties of mother's partner were linked to his offending behaviour, and it is unclear why safeguarding checks were not completed. The recommendation to refer to adult social care post-sentence was not followed by probation in Nottinghamshire, and safeguarding checks prior to transfer were not made in Derbyshire. In addition, it appears that the CPN and PSO in Nottinghamshire accepted the self-report of mother's partner that he was engaging with mental health services, which was not the case. Had practitioners in the MPS and CRC taken a more investigative approach, this may have resulted in the consideration of the potential impact of mother's partner's mental health on the children. And finally, we look at the effectiveness of intervention and formality of action plan. The correct procedure was followed by the multi-agency team as a missing from home interview was completed during the first home visit. Information provided by the GP in the referral to the multi-agency team contained information about mother's partner's mental health, which was not considered to be an issue. A verbal action plan was agreed between the multi-agency team, mother's partner and child A. However, this was not within the context of a CAF, and an opportunity to obtain information about the whole family in a systematic way was lost. As noted previously in the SCR, intervention by the multi-agency team, School 1 and School 2, was inevitably limited, as this was directed at offering support to and encouraging the behavioural change of child A. Without a clear plan, it is very difficult to judge what success would have looked like. The multi-agency team closed the case following a positive feedback from mother's partner and staff at School 1. As the plan had not been formalised and the purpose of the intervention was not clear, as it could have been, it was difficult for all professionals involved to have a discussion about whether outcomes had been achieved. Senior managers from the multi-agency team informed this review that it would not have been appropriate to keep the case open, given information that was known at the time and positive feedback received from the family, including child A herself. It was the view of managers and multi-agency team practitioners consulted during this review that the work of the multi-agency team had been effective. At the learning event, staff within School 1 expressed a view that it would have been helpful to continue with the one-to-one between Child A and the multi-agency team, as this would have provided Child A with someone she trusted to talk to at what was a challenging time. Mother and mother's partner told the lead reviewer that they did not think they had a choice or could ask about continuing the sessions with the multi-agency team youth worker. It is possible that these discussions could have taken place had there been a multi-agency discussion prior to the closure of this case. However, it is noted that Child A was offered drop-in facility to access ongoing support from the multi-agency team youth worker at the school, and she had made use of this previously. Without CAF or an early help assessment form, Child A became the focus of intervention, and the opportunity to consider additional factors that may have contributed to the presenting difficulties was not taken. Derbyshire had introduced a new integrated structure with a single assessment process for service delivery to children, young people and their families. The case of Child A was referred to Children's Services prior to these new processes, and if referred now, Children's Social Care Managers in Derbyshire are confident that a CAF early help assessment form would have been carried out earlier to identify the needs of all family members and coordinate multi-agency working. School 2 responded proactively to information provided by School 1 and allocated Child A with a key worker, which enabled School 2 to respond quickly to specific instances usually relating to what was described as challenging or attention-seeking behaviour. Following the initial call to MASH, School 2 provided a range of support which was described by the school at School 2, the staff at School 2, as effective. The agency report from Nottinghamshire Education provided for this review noted that the difficulties experienced by School 2 in getting support from other agencies together with an improvement in the behaviour of Child A and the belief the school support was effective resulted in staff at School 2 continuing to work alone to support Child A. The perception that it had been difficult to obtain support was repeated by teachers from School 2 during the learning event. It is noted that advice about how to obtain support had been provided by the MASH, however this was not followed by School 2. The advice given to School 2 when contacting the MASH in Nottinghamshire was appropriate given the information that was shared. It was a significant omission that School 2 did not complete a written referral or provide feedback to the MASH about the lack of progress in obtaining support from early help services, and the angry reaction of Mother when concerns were shared with her. The agency report for Nottinghamshire Education noted that concerns about Child A met the threshold for provision of early help support, and the intervention by other services and from information known by School 2 at the time would appear to be the case. School 2 communicated concerns verbally during 2 telephone calls to the MASH in 2014 and March 2015. Advice given to complete an early help assessment form, which would have resulted in the written communication of concerns, was not followed by School 2. School 2 reported that they lacked confidence in the effectiveness of the early help assessment form at the time. They also thought the the support offered to Child A by staff was effective, and there were reported periods of stability for Child A within the school. This is also likely to have influenced the decision not to complete a written early help assessment form. The system of recording safeguarding incidents in School 2 was not consistent with policy. Whilst this did not impact the actions that were taken, there was the potential for significant information to be omitted from the safeguarding log, which would have been significant if Child A had moved schools again, or if the key staff in school had changed. It was an important initiative by School 2 to instigate weekly positive phone calls to mother and mother's partner. These phone calls will have gone some way to break the cycle of negative communication between School 2, mother and mother's partner. However, the impact of frequent negative communication on the well-being of child A was not assessed or understood. And the final analysis was around the communication between agencies. Communications between agencies was very good at times and child-focused. The transition email from School 1 to 2 stated that a CAF had been initiated immediately prior to the move and detailed safeguarding concerns, information about mother's partner's mental health, and the interventions provided at School 1 by the multi-agency team. This is an example of proactive information sharing by School 1. School 1 had also been proactive in seeking information about Child A after she'd arrived in their school. This history was recorded in a confidential file and transferred to School 2. At the time, the local Safeguarding Children's Board was since informed that School 2 had limited appreciation of the information within the confidential file, and this was not used to inform interventions and support provided. It is evident that communication between multi-agency team, the School 1 was very good. However, it would have been strengthened by an earlier use of the CAF, as noted previously. This may have led to a multi-agency assessment and response which included contact with and the contribution of mental health services. It is evident that communication between the multi-agency team and School 1 was good. However, it would have been strengthened by the earlier use of CAF, as noted previously. This may have led to a multi-agency assessment and response which included contact with and the contribution of adults' mental health services. The midwife contacted Children's Social Care in Derbyshire when mother booked her antenatal care and prior to discharge to clarify if there were any safeguarding concerns. This is an example of good practice. However, the implications for sibling 2 of a CAF being initiated for child A and sibling 1 were not considered. Services were provided to sibling 2 in isolation, and there was no assessment of the whole family. At the routine transfer in-visit in July 2014 by Health Visiting Services in Nottinghamshire following the birth of sibling 2, it was known that a CAF had been initiated for child A and sibling 1 in Derbyshire. Information was shared via email with the school nurse who worked during term time only. The school nurse changed role before the email was read and the information was not acted upon. Systems have since changed to provide a more robust information sharing processes. It would have been reasonable to expect that the student health visitor would have been encouraged by her mentor to adopt a think family approach and consider the implications for sibling 2 of a CAF for the older children. It is important that student health visitors receive appropriate oversight and support in their work with families when additional needs have been identified. Nottinghamshire Healthcare Foundation Trust has a Think Family strategy and a Think Family safeguarding training course that is now offered to all Nottinghamshire Healthcare Foundation Trust staff. At the time of the first telephone contact between School 2 and the MASH in Nottinghamshire, there was already significant concerns within School 2 about the behaviour of child A. Whilst child A had only just started at School 2, it was evidence that staff considered information provided by School 1 together with their own observations to avoid that start again syndrome, noted as a cause for concern in previous series case reviews. Information about communication between School 2 and the MASH is detailed earlier in this report. The 2 telephone calls to the MASH were made by different people from school and were received by different MASH officers. Now, whilst all calls to the MASH are routinely audio recorded, the procedure to make a written record of calls and not accepted as referrals in the MASH was not in place at the time. This resulted in advice provided during the second call not taking information into account, information that had previously been shared by the school. Practice has since been changed, and all electronic records are made when a call, whether or not it's a referral or not. The purpose and outcome of the call and agreed actions are now explicit in records, and there is a clear audit trail of all calls being made about a child. However, even if a written record of both calls has been made or taken, it would not have impacted on decision making as to the MASH's interpretation and assessment of their own thresholds of intervention by children's social care. Transcripts of the telephone calls between MASH officers and School 2 indicate that School 2 communicated concerns about Child A, but appeared to be satisfied with the advice provided at the time. Whilst managers at School 2 have stated subsequently that they felt let down and unsupported when seeking support and advice from other agencies, it is noted that these comments have been made with knowledge of what happened to Child A. But communication between School 2 and the MASH may have been influenced by issues relating to power and confidence in the professional's ability and knowledge of education professionals to offer a different view to colleagues perceived as experts in safeguarding. Advice provided to School 2 by the MASH during the first telephone contact was not followed fully by School 2. They made telephone contact with early help, but did not follow this up when they were told that the early help threshold had not been met. There is no record of the contact made within early help services. This raises a question about the record-keeping processes within early help services at the time. However, these have since been reviewed and changed. Processes and procedures within early help services are reportedly now more robust and supported by the increased integration of MASH and early help services, something that we see reflected in the practice of early help in Warwickshire. Clear integration. Early help assessment form is the approved way of identifying the support needs of a family and to help signpost them to appropriate services. Whilst the issue in this case appears to be the lack of confidence by School 2 in the early help assessment form to provide an effective means of assessing early help services, it's important to note that there is an escalation process in place to resolve professional disagreement in the handling of specific cases. Difficulties in escalating concerns has featured in previous serious case reviews in Nottinghamshire, for example IN15. And Nottinghamshire Safeguarding Children's Board at the time made concerted efforts to raise awareness about good practice with regard to the escalation of concerns. Guidance at the time of the telephone calls between the MASH and School 2 was worded in a way that reflects a hierarchy within organisations through which concerns could be escalated. However, this was not helpful for schools as the designated safeguarding lead may not be the most senior person in school. Guidance about the escalation of concerns was revised in 2015, and the new procedure provides clarification for colleagues within education about the correct process to follow. The MASH has a web page which contains information to professionals who wish to report a safeguarding concern. This includes advice about the value of completing an early help assessment form and a recommendation to follow up referrals in writing within 24 hours. This expectation is also reflected in the Nottinghamshire Safeguarding Children's Board Interagency Safeguarding Children procedures. There remains a fundamental issue that School 2 lacked confidence in the process as identified during this review. The board was told they may wish to consider whether early help assessment form is used effectively by schools within Nottinghamshire and to respond to any findings. It's important to note at this point, however, that a survey to review referrer satisfaction to the MASH in Nottingham in 2014 provided positive feedback about the service. Decision-making processes about when to take action without parental consent are complex, and there must be justifiable evidence to proceed without informing the parents. There was no evidence to suggest that Child A would be at immediate risk if the concerns about emotional abuse were shared with Mother. School 2 reported at the learning event that Mother was very angry when informed of the disclosure and blamed Child A for a behaviour in causing upset within the family. Consideration does not appear to have been given to the possibility that Child A may have been a scapegoat within the family and could have been at risk for speaking out. There was no discussion about the potential impact of this disclosure and possible consequences for Child A. And it is worth noting that in the changes to GDPR in 2018, we're now really clear in our response to such concerns that we should only not share information with parents if we feel that to do so would place that child at risk of significant harm. Decision-making processes about when to take action without parental consent are complex. We know that. Decision-making processes about when to take action without parental consent must be justified. There must be evidence to proceed without informing the parents. There was no evidence to suggest that child A would be at immediate risk if the concerns about emotional abuse were shared with mother. Following a telephone call from school 2 to a school nurse, it was recorded on child A's medical records that the result of the referral to school 2 was that the MASH felt there was insufficient information to take the referral forward, and school 2 were to monitor the situation. Whilst this demonstrated information sharing between school 2 and the community nurse, the information shared was inaccurate and partial. A referral had not been accepted by the MASH, and the advice was to complete an early help assessment form was not shared. In addition, there was a lack of clarity about what monitoring the situation required and how other agencies could support with this. Communication between adult mental health services and children's social care was not up to the accepted standards, as been discussed in detail within the serious case review. So what does this report conclude? Concludes that whilst there were concerns for the emotional well-being of child A, given the information that was known to professionals at the time, it was not possible to predict that she would die in the circumstances which resulted in this serious case review. Records indicate that child A ran away from home and presented with increasingly challenging and disruptive behaviours at school. Frequent moves of home, school and GP made it difficult for professionals and agencies to develop a coherent picture of child A and the family. It was significant that the family moved at a time the child A developed a relationship with the youth worker and the CAF had been initiated. Positive communication between agencies in Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire has been highlighted. However, this could have been more effective if there had been a formal process of transfer of early help interventions from one area to another. A CAF was initiated in Derbyshire, with the initial meeting taking place in May 2014. Although this was not completed due to the family move to Nottinghamshire, however, there was various other occasions within the timeline for this review when a CAF early help assessment could have and should have been initiated, and these have been highlighted within the analysis that we just went over. It is important to recognise that the omission to initiate a CAF early help assessment must be viewed as a collective responsibility. Prioritisation of the views of the adults within the family and the focus by agencies on challenging the behaviour of child A may have been identified and challenged if a multi-agency meeting involved all family members had been held. Mother and mother's partner were viewed as generally positive and cooperative by staff in school 2. Child A did talk to some professionals at school 1 and school 2 and appeared to have a positive relationship with the youth worker from the multi-agency team. It is not possible, however, to judge whether child A felt heard and understood, as support and intervention was focused on the changes that she needed to make, without consistently looking at the wider family and exploring what may have been influencing her behaviour. Instigation of positive phone calls by school 2 to mother and mother's partner was an attempt to challenge negative perceptions. However, the behaviour of child A remained the focus of change. The view shared by child A with the GP was that she was causing the problems within the home, and it appeared to have dominated the narrative throughout this case. The voice of child A was limited, and the perception was that she was to blame for many of the difficulties within the family was perpetrated, sadly, even by child A herself. Both Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire have robust early help processes and policies. And whilst the system may be in place, this review has highlighted gaps in implementation, as the absence of a CAF early help, there was no agreed or coordinated multi-agency plan, and that for me really draws home the importance of that multi-agency approach to a case like this. Information sharing between Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire was limited, with 2 exceptions of good practice evidenced by the transition email between school 1 and 2, and the telephone call made from the community nurse to alert health services in Nottinghamshire that a CAF had been initiated. Had a CAF early help assessment started when the multi-agency team in Derbyshire first became aware of the emerging needs, it is likely that the information would have been shared with agencies when the family moved, and it would have been more difficult for the family to distance themselves from professionals. Communication of concerns about children between professionals and different agencies can be challenging. This case has highlighted the importance of recording and sharing agreed actions following safeguarding discussions to ensure that there is clarity and professional accountability. When information is shared with parents and carers, it is important that the child is at the centre of the decision to do this, and possible consequences for the child are considered to ensure that actions taken are in the best interest of the child. For me, findings from this report, whilst particular to the case, have striking similarities to findings that have emerged over recent years from other serious case reviews. It's noted that the reviewer said, whilst there's learning to be gained from this review, it is important to ensure that this goes beyond recommendations to address recurrent themes, systems and processes, which evidence has shown may not have achieved the effective learning. Involvement of practitioners in multi-agency discussions to identify how learning can be implemented in a meaningful way could enhance working practices and relationships, and is more likely to achieve sustained change. So what good practice was identified then? And this is really important, that, as we said at the beginning, that idea of the SILT model being to identify good practice as well. The following good practice was identified. The report identified that timely and detailed information sharing between School 1 and 2 alerted School 2 to safeguarding concern and avoided that start again syndrome that's spoken about a lot in previous case reviews. The telephone calls between School 2 and the MASH in Nottinghamshire share concerns about Child A and the family dynamics. The responsive and emphatic support offered to Child A by School 1 and School 2. Mother and mother's partner were really clear throughout this report to describe that relationship between the key worker in School 2 to Child A to be really positive. The home visit by School 1 and the multi-agency team when Child A didn't attend school, and again it really focused in there, the good practice identified that proactive approach has been a strong move. The provision of that one-to-one support from the multi-agency team youth worker. Those weekly phone calls from School 2 to inform parents of positive achievements, shifting the narrative from negativity to positivity. The review of the GP records in Nottinghamshire that allowed for that early identification for the case to be considered at a safeguarding meeting within the GP surgery. And the effective and efficient communication by the missing at home officer in Nottinghamshire to start those conversations with Derbyshire and engage that process of information sharing about Child A and the family. And it is through those recommendations that identification of good practice that we start to identify opportunities to improve practice as well. Those opportunities to improve practice have been identified by considering the learning from the review. The findings from the review and subsequent action plans were considered by both the Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire Safeguarding Children's Board. Single agency recommendations identified in the agency reports are also to be monitored and have been monitored by the respective boards. So the recommendations. The first one was that the Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire Safeguarding Children's Board seek assurance that assessments and plans for early help intervention are agreed by families and have clearly identified outcomes. 2. The Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire Local Safeguarding Children's Board are to review the policy and information sharing processes when a child moves school within and between local authorities to ensure consistent practice that is robust and effective and which reflects the good practice identified in this review. And that for me is a really important point for us to remember in schools as well. We should never underestimate the importance of effective information sharing, especially from one school to another in that transition period. Recommendation 3 was that the Nottinghamshire Safeguarding Children's Board ensure that practice is consistent and child-centred when potential safeguarding concerns to be discussed with parents and carers. And it is through those considerations that a range of questions come about. Question 1. How can the safeguarding boards be satisfied that the potential impact of adult mental health difficulties on children is adequately assessed by all partner agencies? And further to that, our question to ourselves is, do we as schools recognise the impact of adult mental health difficulties on our children and young people? Question 2. How do we as leaders, or to translate, how do we as leaders assure ourselves that policies and procedures and training accurately reflects the importance of identifying the potential root cause for a child's behaviour and the negative impact of labelling children because of their behaviours, namely as attention seeking? Now, whilst that question was posed at the safeguarding boards, I think that's one that really looks to us in schools as well. What do we do in that area? Behaviour is a form of communication, we know that. What is it the child's trying to tell us? Question 3 was to the Safeguarding Children's Board. It said that they should seek assurance that all schools comply with policy and procedure when recording and reporting safeguarding concerns. And the last question was, how can the Children's Board monitor the use of early help forms in school and the confidence of referrers in the process? So again, we can take something from that as leaders. We can look at that and think, how much do we use early help in schools? How much, when we use it, do we involve parents, the school nurse, the local GP, any previous schools that were involved in the family? That holistic approach to early help is so important to effective information sharing. So again, what do we take from that? We take from that the question, how often do we use early help processes in our school? Early intervention and support for families will be more effective, coercive and focused when delivering with a written assessment and plan to clarify the focus of the work and to enable outcomes to be monitored and evidenced. Adults who present with mental health problems can have an impact on the whole family. It is important that the needs of children who live with adults who have reported mental health problems should be systematically assessed by all partner agencies to ensure that children and families receive the support they require. And it is important for us as leaders in schools that we often and consistently communicate that need and our desire to achieve that goal with those agencies, pushing them to make those assessments and have those conversations. Assessments following the identification of emerging needs should explore the wishes and feelings of the child to further understand the cause of a child's behaviour and possible underlying issues. The intervention should avoid only focusing on the behavioural change of the child. The potential consequences for the child should be considered by those involved before sharing concerns about the possible emotional abuse with parents and carers. When a child moves schools, professionals should be aware of the child's history, and it's also for us to alert any receiving schools as to any gaps in their history. Peat died in 2015, but is forever remembered by her friends and her family. Serious case reviews are always difficult to read, but it is important that we take away the learning to enhance our future opportunities to safeguard children.